o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and call the School Board Workshop Health Services workshop to order. And it looks like Miss Sarah and Lauren, you're going to go ahead and give us an update, or at least get us started.
Good morning, Sarah's joining us in a second.
Okay.
We have our team from the advisors, Provinsure and Medicine Care. We'll go over our monthly update, and also you should have gotten a packet in front of you with Provinsure. This is our analytics for the last year on the health plan too. So we'll go over any of those questions that you have.
Oh, okay.
Wait, you guys don't have one? Hold on. We're missing, do you have an extra one? We're missing a board member.
No, there's two right here.
Oh,
okay.
oh, yes, thank you.
So, Kenneth, do you want to go over it first? So the first part of our presentation is regarding the health center. So Kenneth Aldridge will be going over that. Is it? No?
I would almost get something there.
Is the mic?
There you go.
There you go. So again, say welcome to the report and then get to you.
So this is the typical monthly report that we provide you. We have, it's going to be a condensed presentation because we know that you have another group that's going to be coming in shortly. So on my part, the areas that I wanted to focus on was on page 4 or 12, which is the customer service satisfaction. We hit 4.86 out of 5, and with that, we had over 805 surveys that were submitted for those results. And so you can see it's over the time it's escalated in the number of surveys that have been responded to, and then also the customer satisfaction that we've received. The next section that I wanted to focus in on was, when you're looking at your population, you're looking at prevalence. How many people have either high blood pressure or diabetes? And one of the things that I wanted to point out was there's the total population of SDOC, and then there's a population that are actually coming to your health center. So as we were looking at the data, we actually saw more and more of the diabetics and hypertensives are actually coming to your health center now. And so the other area we wanted to look at, okay, wait, did our prevalence or did the number of new diabetics or hypertensives increase? And really, there was a nominal increase. So everything that you have been doing and we've been doing has actually migrated patients to your health center with those specific diseases. And the data on page 14 and 15 provides that, with also the changes in the population and also the prevalence associated to those disease processes. Remember, as we've talked about 75 to 85% of your spend is going to be spent on those chronic care conditions. Well, the more people that we have coming to your health center, the better we're going to have the ability to control those measures. The next area we wanted to focus in on really quickly was the service of our physical therapy and our IMC program. The areas that we wanted to touch on were, hey, has it been successful for the population? And so we actually broke it up into two cohorts. One cohort is your associates that are coming to the health center and receiving physical therapy for musculoskeletal diseases. And the other cohort is the people who are not. And so on your report on page 19, you can see the variance in the cost for the high risk of almost $1,000 per member per year. And then on the low risk, look at the variance of $166 for people who are not coming to your health center versus those who are. And so that just continues to support the programs that we put in for our musculoskeletal. And then we also broke it down into the different type of services that were received that actually contribute to the cost, which is on page 20. And then we also wanted to dive into what kind of injuries or what kind of issues from a musculoskeletal point of view were actually occurring and being serviced at your health center. So these, yes?
You want questions during the?
Absolutely. You guys throw out questions.
Madam Chair, could I ask a question?
Yes. What I was going to ask you to do, Kenneth, was just after you go over one chart, just take a little pause to make sure that we've all synthesized the information. It's a lot. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Kenneth, if you go back to the prior slide, the one that showed the 3 million. So the non-healthcare uses, it's a 3 million one plus cost to us, and the healthcare uses are the 1.2. right?
Health center, yes.
What would be the estimated, or what would have to be done if the board decided to mandate everybody to use the health center?
Well, so we would want to make sure, I mean, if you were gonna mandate that, Frank, we'd
Right.
wanna make sure from an accessibility standpoint.
Right.
Because there's not that many IMC certified trained physical therapists out in the community. We are in talks with a group that is putting it in, so then that would give you more, give your associates more access. I mean, not everybody, I think the St. Cloud and the Point Siena, don't, you know, they don't wanna travel or cross a certain river or something like that I've heard. But we'd wanna make sure that that's available before we would recommend any kind
No,
of
I got you.
mandate.
Alright.
Yes, sir.
Now, does that include like primary care services too on that slide, or?
So yes, so anything related to the health center, our providers are trained on the IMC method of triaging and then getting them over to the physical therapy. So that's included in the savings.
Because one thing I would like to see in the beginning, when we look at utilization overview, because it has like how many went to medical, and those are good.
Mhm.
What I would like to see added is what is the percentage of employees, like kind of like unique employee visits. You know what I'm trying to say, hey, let's say we have, 500 regulars, but we got like 100 new employees coming to the clinic versus how many total? Because then I can see that trend too, because that tells me that, hey, employees are not coming as much, because the visits can be there, but it could be the same person coming 2 or 3 times, as opposed to like a unique visit. Like, so that's kind of what I'd like to see is over time, how many employees, 'cause I think that should be a goal that we should try to set too, because we should try to improve customer service or improve whatever to get to 100% without being mandatory. Like you said, the ideal scenario is everybody goes to the health clinic because they want to go to the health clinic.
You're absolutely right. So on page 8 and 9, that's where you can see new medical visits, and on physical therapy on page 9, you'll see new physical therapy visits. And then also broken down onto new visits associated with workers' comp and physical therapy.
But if we just have like an overall running total and
Yeah.
say, hey, this is the percentage, right? As of today, we're at 51% using the clinic, you know what I mean? And next week we can see, okay, next month we get 55 or we're going to 48, you know what I mean? Just an overall number, just a simple statistic. I mean, we're already
Absolutely.
collecting it, it's not
Yeah.
nothing new. I just want to get a feel for how many employees are actually using the health clinic on a regular basis.
So you wanted it segregated to employees or the total population, or just employees?
Well, only employees are allowed to use the clinic, or?
No, sir, dependents can use the facility,
Um,
family members.
On page 3
That
of
are
your
insured.
presentation,
Yeah, oh, I see what you're saying, like if the, yeah.
here, under the top chart, unique patients, right here.
I'll put by
That's
number of
for-
employees, to keep it simple then, just because then it'll skew the numbers, because if we got like 3 new people and they're like just 3 kids of an employee, then to me that's how the numbers can get a little bit off. I just wanna see just employees for right now. It's how many, we have 8,000 employees in the school district, for instance. Out of those 8,000, how many enrolled at the health center? And then we can kind of keep that on a monthly tracker, and we can see the date and say, okay, are more employees enrolling or less employees enrolling? Because if there's a big dip, we're like, ooh, what happened that month? Was it because of, you know what I mean? We just kind of just a real simple statistic. Total number of employees versus how many are enrolled at the health center.
Absolutely, yeah,
Makes sense
we've
to
got
add
that.
how many employees actually are insured through the school district
Correct.
as well, because otherwise the data's gonna be skewed.
Correct.
Like if they're not insured through the school district, then we shouldn't count them in as using the
And
clinic.
what would be, just to help me understand, are you talking about like say for instance, if I'm married with somebody and I'm on their health plan instead of my health plan?
Yeah.
And so that doesn't really count, because if I'm on somebody else's health plan, why would I go to the school district?
Well,
Right,
you
so we
can't.
wanna take them out of the data.
Okay, yeah, that's
Okay.
fair, that's fair,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fair,
What we
yes.
would do is generally call it members, because sometimes it's the spouse that comes more often than the employee. So we just break it down how many members are covered and how many members are coming each month, and we can track that for you.
Yeah, we'll break it down into
Yeah.
employees.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, and I like the amendment that the chairwoman said, subtracting out, because the point is, what is the potential versus where we're at? That's the whole goal, and trying to get as many people enrolled. And I'm never gonna go after somebody that's already enrolled on their spouse's plan, because we're not gonna get them to switch to come to our plan if they're at somebody else's plan. So,
Absolutely.
that's it.
Oh, is it?
Any other questions regarding the health center? Now we'll go under our financial report. And Ashley will be presenting that.
Okay, so page 24, and respect for everybody's time,
We'll just kind of maybe just touch on, or I will touch on some key points, and if you have any other questions, let me know. If you'll go about this first chart that's in the upper left, corner, if you'll go down to about halfway where it says PEPM total expenses per employee per month, total expenses, you'll see that you peaked at $811 per employee per month. And since we've taken over, you've gone down to $761 and to $717, and we want that to obviously continue. In order to get that line item to continue decreasing, you will see a increase on some smaller line items. So if you go down a little bit further under the direct contract vendors, PEPM, you will see that has increased over the years, significantly increased. We kind of call that the little bucket. So the little bucket, we are any sort of new solutions that we have, that's an extra cost, but it pays big dividends on that first line item expense I was talking about. So hopefully we continue to decrease and decrease and decrease. Yes?
May I ask, well, first, any board members have a question about these calculations? Thank you. My question is, so we see that the expense 717 during this year, is the direct contract vendors cost the only additional cost that we have incurred in order to bring this number down, A? And B, is there a column or some kind of calculation somewhere in this spreadsheet that just gives us like the raw number? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, the raw number is, I think if I'm hearing you correctly, it's total expenses where it goes from 63 million down to 54, is that?
no, I apologize, let me be more clear. So I'm trying to extrapolate well, yes, you're right. The total expenses, so that would be PEPM total expenses, which the current number is 717, right? So that's per person who's insured,
Yes.
So
Okay.
per employee.
per employee,
No,
okay,
it's per member.
per member.
Oh, no,
it's-
excuse me,
employee.
it's per
And
employee.
you would multiply that
Per employee.
717 times that 6330 right above it to get to that, and times 12 to get to that 54.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. What I'm asking is, because we have incurred additional costs in order to bring that number down,
Yeah.
do we have like an actual raw, like savings, I guess? You know what I mean?
So-
Am I asking the question correctly?
I think so. The way I view this is we've saved $14 million in claim costs between medical and pharmacy. And that's comparing column 2, the last year with the prior folks before we took over, with column 4, which is our first full year.
Mhm.
So the way I would express that is we've saved $14 million and we invested, it cost us $2.4 million in extra costs for the map services, the payer compass, and all of the resource structure. And then we invested another $1.9 million in the health center.
Yeah.
This direct contract vendors is your health center, and it is only your health center. All other partner vendor costs are incorporated under fixed costs.
But that 717 is the net bottom line.
Yeah.
So it includes those extra costs, if that.
It does,
Well-
actually, looking at the columns in its totality, it actually makes sense because initially in 2017, that vendor cost was 0 and it has subsequently been added to the number and we're still down. So I
Yes.
understand now.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
And so now you open up Pandora's box for me.
Oh, no. No.
But going back to the same thing that we were just talking about though, real simple though. To calculate the average medical enrollment, when I say 6333, is that now total number of patients that includes
Employees.
dependents or just total number of
That's
employees?
total number of employees on the plan. It does not include dependents.
Okay, so this is, so 63 is the number of employees
Yeah.
using insurance.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's all, my Pandora's box,
Okay.
that was easy. I just wanna make sure that we're comparing apples to apples now, you know what I mean? Cause now you created
And we need to
you created a new definition in my head, so I'm like,
Yeah, we
okay.
need to be careful to point out to you when the calculations are based on employee count and when they're based on member count. And there ought to be a rationale for that as well, when we would use one versus the other.
Yeah, some of the reports that you'll see in the annual report are broken out by, they'll say PM. So it's per member, so that's including dependents versus PM is per employee per month.
Does this have this, right here, does it have like a list of acronyms?
I do not believe so, and we can
That's a
get that
great
for you.
idea.
Please,
The
We'll
legend
get
on
that
there.
for you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cause the only reason why I'm kinda going with that too is, cause I see it going down, does that mean like the number of employees have gone down? Cause I know there's a lot of vacancies this year because of the pandemic, you know, does that skew anything? with the
Yeah.
number of
Well, but
employees?
it has been.
That is why you use that per employee per month, because it makes it an even playing field.
Because if we hire a bunch of people tomorrow, cause we have all these vacancies, then naturally the costs are gonna go up just by default, because
Right.
more people,
Right.
and even if they're not
Exactly.
uber sick, they're gonna
Yeah,
put a burden on
the
the
key
system.
is that if you look at just that raw number of the millions, that can be deceiving based on what you just said. But if you keep it to that per employee per month, it's gonna take all of that out and it's gonna make it an even kind of comparison.
That's it.
And if you'll turn to page 25, this is the rolling 12 months. This is your plan year, October 20th to September 21st. Sorry, let me put that on the screen. And if you'll go down to where it starts at October, it goes all the way down to September 2021, and then right under that it says year to date. If you go all the way over to the right, I think that's the key number. It's showing that you're about 6% under budget.
And you might also note on that same column or the row right above it, September, we ran really hot in September. October has come back down, but September, the claims were up almost $2.5, $3 million.
So we expect that because it was the summer, and that's when they have a chance to go to the doctor, yeah.
Okay.
That's why we weren't bragging real loud in December when we were 54% of budget. Time has a way of evening things towards the norm.
Our population tends to go to the physician when they're off. Our teachers don't like to leave the classroom, so we always have seen a higher spike for the summer claims.
Do you think it'll follow the same trend October through December of 20?
No,
You don't think it?
and because we were changing administrators and we had the claims that were incurred under the prior ASO arrangement that ended up being paid predominantly in October. But the ramp up of claims that were incurred but not through the snake yet typically takes 90 days. I think what we're hoping is it'll be normative at somewhere between 89 and 95% of the budget.
You said it's fine, you don't have, obviously you don't have October's on there, but
You know, October,
what is October's number? What is the,
medical claims were around 3 million, so we came back down somewhat.
oh, okay.
Now, December typically is a slower month. Have we thought about maybe, like, for instance, if we have 3 nurse practitioners always available, I'm just giving you a rough hypothetical. Have we thought about maybe doing 2 in December, then having 4 in the summer, since that way we don't have to budget for higher, you know what I mean, just kind of shifting.
What are you gonna do with the ones you got? Lay them off?
No, but if they're contracted, they're not employees, they can work somewhere else.
They're
not employees.
contracted, they're contracted, but one of the challenges right now going on in healthcare is healthcare providers, MAs, nurses are jumping ship, leaving, working full-time, and if we were to fluctuate this type of shift work, I think that we would lose people. It's really difficult times right now, and the RNs, nurse pracs, even physicians are saying, hey, I wanna cut back on my hours.
Yeah, and a couple of our contracts are priced on a unit cost based on volume. So if we don't have the volume, the cost goes down. We have the volume, it goes up.
The next slide on slide 26 is really the same slide as 25 because it is a plan year to date. And the plan year to date and the rolling 12 were exactly the same this 1 month. On slide 27 are the large claimants that we have that are in excess of $200,000. And so here you can see that we have 20 members whose claims exceeded were about $8.2 million. That's 16% of the total spend for the overall group. You can see some of their diagnoses there. There's one at the very bottom is a possible COVID claims. We can possibly submit that for reimbursement. But these are the high claimants. So when we talk about the financials that we had so far, that's for the overall plan, how much the plan has saved, etc. But we wanted to point out that there are ways in which the members or the employees are also saving money on their side. Because, so we made the plan better, we made the benefits richer for them. So we wanted to show out some ways in which that is happening. So on slide 29, you'll show it's very similar to what we just talked about before as far as the average members per month. And again, now we're talking about members. So this is people, belly buttons, not employees. So how many were enrolled?
Well, it's employees plus the dependents.
Plus the dependents, yes. Then we show how much each from the 2018-19 plan year, 19-20, and then 20 to 22 plan year, how much their deductible has gone down, how much their co-insurance has gone down, and how much they paid in copay amount went down. And then also as far as the total burden paid by the members, again, that's employees plus any dependents, you'll see how it went from 8.6 million to a little over 8 million. Now it's at 4.2 million. So that's the overall analysis of how much they've saved. And what we want to point out on the next couple of slides is some exact positions of how that money came about. So on slide 30, you'll see that because we're increasing the members that go to the health center, and as you know, anything that the members have done in the health center, they get at no cost. And we have increased the amount of prescription drugs that we dispense there. The majority of them are generics, but any prescription drug they get out of the health center, they pay nothing for. So on this analysis, we show you each month how many prescription drugs were dispensed out of the health center at no cost to the member. The generic drug copay, if they go to a preferred pharmacy, is $6. So if we took that $11,458 and each of them paid a $6 copay for that, they saved $68,748 on that.
And we're gonna open a retail pharmacy in the health center in the next 60 days, Kenny?
It's in the works. Yeah.
And hopefully drive more even of the non-health center population into the more tightly controlled environment. And if they're coming in for prescriptions, we hope they would go, hey, this is pretty nice. We'll come here for healthcare.
The next slide on slide 31 talks about the encounters at the health center. So each time a member comes in to see a provider, you'll see here medical encounters, meaning general primary care, the chiropractor, physical therapy, but not workers' compensation, just regular physical therapy, and then wellness coaching. You'll see here, because we have two health plans with various copays, I just used a mix of 50-50, this exercise here, to show if they, for those number of episodes, had they gone on the outside and paid their applicable copay, how much they would have paid for that also. So again, because there's no cost for them to use the health center, it was $428,000 that they saved just in copays to those providers.
And that's the money that the employees save, not the school district saves. So
Correct.
it's not a school district savings, you won't see it on our balance sheet.
Correct.
It's the actual teachers or staff
Yeah.
and everybody themselves that save that money.
Yeah, well, it's actually an expense for the school district because you guys are paying for the health center. The employees benefit at no cost.
Right.
The next one on slide 32 is the money that the employees are saving by using the international drug program through ElectRx. Here you'll see quarterly how many drugs were filled, how many prescription drugs were filled, and these are all high-cost specialty medications. And when the employee engages or member engages with the ElectRx, they don't pay anything for that prescription drug. So here we estimate what their prescription drug savings is for the year, 908 prescriptions, and just the amount the employee saved is a little over 103,000. The amount that the group saved is over $1 million, but again, this is just the amount the employees saved from not having their copay. On slide 33 is for utilizing green imaging. Green imaging is a contractor that we use, or a vendor that we use that uses contracts with independent imaging centers, and we pay significantly less money for those images when we utilize green imaging. When the employee uses green imaging, there is no cost for them. So they could use a CT scan, an MRI, a DEXA scan, whatever it might be. There's no cost to the member for that. So here in this chart, we used the prior examples that we had with the prior plan. And because this image would apply to the deductible, I just used it, the member paid 50% because sometimes the deductible apply, sometimes it would be co-insurance. We just used the 50% just for the illustration here. And with that, you can see that the plan saves $2.3 million, but the members paid, the members saved about $682,000 from utilizing green imaging. We instituted a plan with Medical Advocate Program, we call it MAP, where the employee can call, or the member can call MAP and engage with a nurse and discuss their needs as far as I need to go see a certain specialist, or I need to have different procedures done, and then MAP would go through all of the data and recommend certain providers for them. When the employees engage with MAP, then their deductible for any applicable services would be waived. So on this side here, you'll see the number of people on the two different plans, and out of all the services done, how much in deductibles being waived saved the members. So $261,000 just in waived deductibles the members saved by utilizing MAP. And again, when we utilize MAP, we know that they're going to the better providers because MAP certifies those providers if they use those providers. So that's a great thing.
Do we have an outcomes?
As far as which ones are utilizing MAP,
Right, like once they go to MAP, they use MAP, do we have outcomes? Obviously, it's not here in front of me because,
In the annual report,
yeah,
it would address the cohort
quality of-
saving for.
not just the savings of money, I mean outcomes, health outcomes.
we'd have to be able to do a cohort of people that utilize MAP. We'd have to see if those were
We can
crossover.
look and see.
Yeah. I know
What would be helpful, Mr. McLean? Would you want the cost per member or the cost per encounter?
If we're taking such an active role in prescribing someone that they, or suggesting that they use a specific provider, based on the fact that this provider offers a better service, right, then we should be able to back that up with information for our employees. And say that 500 people have gone to this knee replacement surgery person, and the results have been X, Y, and Z, as opposed to them going to
the
someone
MAP tracks
else's.
it, and it's in our data as far as the quality of providers, but we'll try to find it for you when we
Let's get
start
you-
talking about the data.
Because the driving factor there is quality, not cost savings, frankly. But generally speaking, higher quality care costs less, usually.
Correct.
In the end,
Right. It's in the end that you're looking at.
right.
When we're looking at your plan, there are a lot of different partners that we use to build your plan and analyze your plan. And one of them is an actuary, and he is here this evening. We have Jay Miniotti is here, and his report is on the next couple of slides that he'll be able to review with you. So Jay, if you wanna.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to refer to pages and then point so that everybody can follow along. This is page 36 in the packet. And what I wanna draw first attention to is in the northwest corner, it's this figure of $57 million. This is the cost of the plan in total, or the financing for the plan in total last plan year. The employees contribute 8 million of that, you as a board contribute 49. So the 49 and the 8 is the 57 million that was set aside to finance last year's operations of the health plan. In prior years, that figure had been closer to 60 million, and in prior years to that, the 60 million wasn't enough. So going from 60 down to 57, and you'll see 55 here, means that the board has been able to take some money off the table as far as the cost of running the health plan and use that for other operations of the school district. Right, so 57 million was funded into the plan for last year. Claims ran 44.3 million. The administration of the plan, which would be the cost to process claims, stop loss insurance, all the other pieces of running the plan together, 6.5 million, and the health center about 5.8. So all told, the cost of the plan itself was 56.5 million, with a modest gain of against operations of revenues 57. All right, 57 minus 56.5, that's the $500,000. Okay, that's all this figures here in the northwest corner. The key thing that we're now looking at for this year is where do we think this year's expenses are gonna run? That's right here in the middle, running October of 21 through September of 22. We have $55 million of allocated funding for the plan year. Again, 2 million less than last year. The best estimate for claims this year right now, with data through September 30th of 2021, is that claims are gonna run 42,252,000. The health center is expected to run 5.4 million, the administrative expenses at 6.1. So this column with the bright green in it is where we think, on a best estimate basis, we're gonna end up by the end of the current plan year. Obviously, we're just a couple of months into it, we have a long way to go, but this is the forecast for the year. We expect to have a gain of 1.4 million by the end of it. But it's subject and it's sensitive to different things in the marketplace and the utilization of your plan. So if it turns out the claims run 5% less than the best estimate, they would ring up at 40 million rather than 42 million. And our outcome at the bottom would be 3.4 versus the 1.4. Does everybody follow that part? Questions on
I
that?
understand the numbers, but can you help me understand in this particular, I guess in your projections, what are gains versus losses? What is this number that we're looking at?
It's a simple measure of how much money do you all set aside for that cost versus where we think the expenses are gonna come out at the end.
So how much we're setting aside versus how much you're estimating that we're going to utilize?
And really spend, that's right. The budget
So I should
is
say spent.
55. This is more of an outcome versus budget. Budget
Okay.
55, we think we're gonna come in at 53.7 at this point.
So in the previous charts, Ms. Castillo?
Yeah.
That would be what we call revenue coming into the plan from
Yeah.
employees and board members. Just total, yeah.
I just have two quick questions. One of them is for the health center. Because I noticed it was like 5.8 million, and down to 5.4 million, and it was also projected to be 5.4 million. What was the 400,000 difference? I mean, I appreciate the discount, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, what's accounting for the $400,000 less from the prior year?
Yeah, that would be a Jay question, I'm not sure.
Well, it's actually a Jay and Sarah question.
That 5.8 actually looks high to me. I think there may be some things in that health center number that really belong in the admin number.
Oh, okay, so it's an application.
Yeah, cause the health center expenses, the cost of running the health center is going up, not down.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, because it was 5.8, then it's 5.4, then it was projected for 23 and 24 at 5.4.
Yeah, it was, for the past 12 months, it was reported to us as hard numbers as 4.9 million. So we're not certain where the 5 million for, again, I would defer to.
So what number are we actually, because I always thought the actuarial from October 20, September 21 was actual numbers, not projected. So was it actually at 5.8 for the health center then?
No, what I'm saying, I think if you look at the line for admin and health center, I think there's some stuff in that health center number that really belong in the admin number above it. Just what line they got grouped on. So it looks like there's more sitting in that health center line, the 5.8, that truly does not belong to the health center.
Okay, because this is an important slide, because this kind of gives us what we're doing for projection going forward. Because my next question was gonna be the more important, was if we do the -5%, I'm just saying, because you can't really predict the future, and we have like this $3 million surplus, where would that surplus go? You know what I mean? Would we wanna subsidize the plan more? Or do we wanna hold on to it because the next year you don't know what's gonna go? And so now it gets me a little worried that it's not gonna be 5.4 for the health center, so we may not have. Do you know what I'm saying? That was more of a board question too. So, because, you know, the money left over every year is not guaranteed. And so do we wanna take that money that's left over and spend it on something else? You know, doing some kind of, like, I don't know, buy more school buses. I don't know, I'm pretty sure there's some kind of restriction on what you can do with that money. But let's just assume, for hypothetical, that we use it somewhere else. Then the next year, we end up with a claim loss, and then we have to subsidize it, basically get that money and bring it right back.
Right.
So do we wanna keep like a reserve balance as a school board to kind of sit there and say, okay, let's buffer until we know that this is gonna be like the new normal, what the cost will be, and then kind of either subsidize more, give it back to the plan. Like, I know Mr. Aguero mentioned that before too. You know, we have all this extra money, it's not just for us to go, hey, maybe we increase the employee contribution so they pay less into the plan. So, but I can't even make that extrapolation if what I'm hearing is 5.8 is not really what it is, then it's not 5.4 in the future, it's really gonna be a little bit higher. So I just want a little bit more of an actual, I'm thinking about actuary, I'm thinking more accurate. No, I need more accurate numbers moving forward on what the expenses are.
Sarah and I will coordinate on the accounting codes that are used to allocate into the two buckets and ensure that.
But it wouldn't have been changed, right, between 1 month and the next, or 1 year and the next, right? I mean, the formula, you put in the formula, it should,
No, it usually is consistent.
right, so I mean, that's very strange. He asked about it, I was actually looking at the admin number, which also is $500,000 more.
It's $1.2 million more than what we spent.
Well, you have 6.5 in admin here, and then 6 in the next column.
Right.
Then you have 6.1 projected for 22-23. Then you have 6.2. I guess it's kind of going up, but it's still less than what
But
the
it
prior
sounds
year
like
was.
that admin cost is then potentially is gonna go up, because you're saying that the health center 5.8, you're gonna roll some of that over into admin, which is gonna push that number up even.
Well, no,
No?
because that would not make sense. 5.8 under the health center, 6.5 in admin, 6 the following year, right? And then 5.4 the following year for the health center. And then in 22, and then in the next column, you have 6.1, so there's an incremental increase, small increase. And then 6.2, that's all normal, right? The other numbers, but the whole chart together does not make sense.
It's just, the health center is a fixed number. So that should be 5.4 throughout.
Not
It's not.
really a
It's
fixed
not.
number, because it's, every time somebody goes to the health center, there's costs, variable costs related to that. But I think for purposes of your conversation about surplus, and should money stay there, we don't really know where we're gonna end the year, and that's what Jay is trying to show here, is this variability that we don't know exactly what our costs are going to be throughout the year in terms of claims as well, is you guys have a board approved budget right now, and the budget shows a small surplus for this year. So that would be my recommendation, is that we continue as is. As we get through the next 6 months or so, we'll see if we have a much more significant surplus this year, then I think there's a conversation to potentially be had. But the plan right now is that everything's staying within the trust fund until we get to a level where the board feels like there's something there we can do differently with.
We commend that decision. One of the biggest struggles we have as advisors, whether it's the private sector, where the business owner wants to buy a new car, or in the municipal sector, where if we save money in the benefit budget, they're filling more potholes. But they're spending everything, just depending upon where they spend it. And we're constantly advising, let's be reasonable, take a longer view and build a buffer. Keep that money in the budget until such time as it's obvious you can bleed it somewhere else.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes.
What is the national average of percentage-wise of increase in healthcare? How does that measure up regarding are decreased percentage-wise?
Jay?
The next slide, number 37, is an analysis specific to you all. And it is over several years, but I'll more directly answer the first part of your question. Nationally, medical trend is in the 6 or 7% range. Pharmacy trend is in the double digits to high double digits, specifically driven by specialty pharmacy. Weighted together, medical and pharmacy, it's in the 8-9 range. Your plan, this is now slide 37.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
The top half of this is geared to the plan year, which runs October through September. The bottom half of this runs July through June, which is your fiscal year. So plan year and fiscal year. But the results are very similar. They're consistent with each other. This green line is the net incurred claims per employee per month. So it does include all of the claims that dependents of your employees incur as well, but it's just modified to be divided by the number of employees. So you'll see 790, 777, 705, 513. And over the last 2 plan years, the trend in the plan has been negative. The longer run trend, which we use for projections, if we were to do this on a plan year basis, we would use 5%. If we were to use fiscal year projections, it would be 6%. The prior page is based on a 5% claims trend.
So do I understand you right? We're going down percentage-wise while the rest of the country is effectively going up.
Yeah, we're going down against the market that is going up, yes.
That's where I want.
Currently.
So it's not going slower, we're actually going down, reducing costs as opposed to going at a slower rate essentially.
Very well said, yeah.
Which is still a benefit. If you go slower than national rate, you're doing great. The fact that we're actually reducing costs.
Even icing on the cake, yeah.
There are not a lot of plans that have this bend the way that you do. My specialty is self-funded health plans. I have 20 municipal accounts throughout the state, and I do this for about 200 groups across the country. And not many of them have this type of score.
Mr. Thacker?
Do you have the ability on those 200 that you manage across the country or whatever you just said, to bump that together and put the line on this curve of where it would be?
They're all through different brokerages. I'm an independent practitioner.
Okay.
It would be very hard to do.
Is there any kind of industry? Is there any kind of medical industry that publishes that kind of data on what the overall costs are doing?
PwC, Siegel, there are a handful of national trend surveys available. Kaiser Family Foundation is one. The Wall Street Journal quotes those folks usually on an annual basis.
I think it's important for us to point out that when we were asked to engage with the school district, the RFP said, tell us about your actuary. And our approach was, you don't want an actuary we're paying giving you advice. You want somebody who has nothing to do with us. Now, we introduced Jay, but we argue with him more than we do anything. But he does not work for us.
No, I wouldn't question that.
No, I just wanted to add that.
I do think that would be some data that I would like to see. I know that you said that there are some firms out there that do have it, you don't, but it's important to know what this data is pegged to. How do we analyze this if we just have our internal numbers?
Because my basic logic tells me we're doing well. I mean, obviously, because I don't live under a rock, and I know that healthcare inflation itself is going up. I mean, gas prices, everything is going up. So I can't imagine healthcare not going up. So the fact that we're not going up at the same rate as everything else, I hate to give too many kudos in public, but somebody's doing a good job.
How many municipalities did you say you handle? Did you say 20?
23 in the state of Florida.
Can you aggregate the other 22 and put them on a curve like this?
Possibly.
I mean, I'm not looking for 6 months worth of work, I don't know how this data's sitting out there.
I'll have to get back to you.
Okay.
Because I don't know about the Vicky.
I mean, even if it's 22 compared to 1, it would be an interesting,
Yeah, at least if it's the state of Florida minimum.
That's even
We're not-
probably
even if we don't
better
look at
than
Rhode
that.
Island, just at least Florida.
What's probably
Yeah,
more
and it's-
doable, would be for the school districts that I do work
Yeah.
for. I do Pasco schools, Levi County, Bay County, you all, of course. That might be a little bit easier to see what's going on.
Having brought that up, all of the benchmarks in our annual report are the, 8 or 9 million people in the Deer Walk data pool. But we can purchase benchmarks. And we've talked about school districts throughout the country as one, but we also talked about the total marketplace in the Greater Orlando SMSA. That's got about 88,000 lives. The other one has, I want to say, 11 million. But I don't know if you want to compare to what's going on in your region or in your industry, coast to coast.
I think you tell us, what makes more sense? Isn't it more regional than national?
We think regional makes more sense.
It seems to make more sense.
The other comment I'll make about the, go ahead.
Madam Chair, I was just simply going to say that you mentioned Pasco County. In terms of demographics, population size, they're very similar to our school district, so that might be a good comparison group. They have been operating health centers more aggressively for a longer period of time than we have. And their insurance, I believe, it is still like with Abuka. I'm not sure who, I think they were with Cigna for years. But they have done a lot of work to control their spend, and like I said, their demographics would be similar. Might be worth looking at that one.
Yeah, you all have 6,500 employees on plan, 9,000 total membership. Pasco is about 8,000 employees, closer to 9,000. For a group to be considered in the actuarial field fully credible, meaning its experience is predictive of its future, when we put a lot of stock in the numbers that we get out of it, you would have maybe 500 or 1,000 employees. So you have more than enough regularity in the count of people that you cover for these numbers to hold water. Are there questions about the trend exhibit? I was going to flip back to the prior page and just mention this colorful exhibit in the southeast corner, the large claim profile. This is a stratification of the large claims. I wanted to specifically mention how the purple column of October of 20 to September 21 was different than the average of the 3 years in the orange columns to the right. If you go to the far right, that October of 17 to September of 18, the interpretation of the chart is as such. You had 79 claims that were in excess of $100,000. That's an individual claimant who rang up more than 100 grand. Of those 79, 14 of those 79 individuals had claims that were at 300,000 or higher. 4 of those 14, 4 of those 79 had claims in excess of $500,000. So as you walk down the chart, those figures are in the numbers above them. This is not additive, it's subtractive. Well, the point of this is that for the 3 years leading up to last year, the district averaged almost 90 claims at 100,000 and above. 12 of those were at 300,000 and above. This past year, you only had 50 claims at 100,000 and above. 50 versus 90, okay? That's a big deal. And it's not all attributed to COVID, it's not all attributed to some of the programs that we have in place, but a good portion of it is. And that's what helps contribute to better experience and a negative trend rate over time, is having fewer large claims. As large claims go, so goes the financial performance of the plan.
Yeah, but that gets kind of tricky, because for someone to have like a $900,000 medical bill, it's because they have like a serious medical
Catastrophic
condition.
event.
Yeah,
That's exactly
something
right.
like,
Transplant, preemie.
yeah, and I'm just trying to be honest here, I mean, it's like, I can't hold you guys accountable for something like that, cause that's like, I don't think, hey, they skipped a few medical visits, then all of a sudden they got that, you know what I mean, it's like, and I don't wanna even isolate, cause then you get to like almost like segregating employees, cause we can't say, okay, if you're super sick, you can't work in the district, so that gets kinda tricky legal ground too, but,
You might be suggesting that some of this is accidental, and I appreciate
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Where all.
Beyond our control.
Well, where all these programs and going to the health center and all those things really matter are for the everyday health.
Yeah, the smaller claims, I wouldn't see it as a big outliers, those are like for like the 20,000 and 10,000.
Maintenance medications, et cetera.
Can I just, if I would just comment on something, is, you know, the numbers here are different, especially between this year, is that because we have the new contracts and we are paying less for healthcare. So some of those claims that are now $100,000 are there because the actual cost of that claim is a lot less this year than it was in previous years. We
And
aren't
because
getting,
of that,
yeah, so
Sure.
we're using the better providers, we have better contracts with those hospitals and those providers, and that's why we're paying less. The people might have had the exact same conditions, but we didn't spend as much because we have better contracts now.
yeah, I think, I'd be comfortable taking some credit for the 100,000 level, but Mr. Melendez, you're right, above that, I mean, we're probably knocking some off the cost, but there's nothing you can do about that. There's very, very little you can do about that.
Any other questions for me?
Jen came up from Tampa to be with us today, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you,
Yeah.
Jay.
The next item that we have on our agenda is to discuss the annual report. And you all have a green bound novel that we provided that gives some highlights of the annual report.
I had a conversation with one of the board members at the FSBA, and rightfully the comment was, when are we gonna get some data? And when are we gonna get some data that we can use and start improving things? And my comment to that board member was, well, in the next couple of days, you're gonna get a report. That's a heck of a report. It's got a lot of data in it. And we hope you've had a chance to review it. We've tried to give you some executive oversight. But for the purposes of our time today, because we do have other people coming in behind us. As I mentioned, we spent 11 million less in claims. And in pharmacy, this isn't entirely accurate. It is 100% accurate. 8,200,000 because we lowered the cost of claims. But offsetting that, we did have 4.2 million increase in utilization. We don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Very importantly, your members are only paying 11.23% of the claims, and all benchmarks that I've seen are topped in excess of 16%. So you're treating your members well. Script utilization was up, as I mentioned. Average script per cost is down, which is the efforts of your team and the partners. ER visits are down. I think that's great. A lot of that, I think, has to do with people relying more and more on the health center, frankly. But our average cost in the ER went from 35,000 to 26,000. I'm going to make a provocative thing I would want you to think about. Unquestionably, we think we're good, and we think we've done a good thing for you. Part of me says, are we that good, or was it that bad previously? Because there's two ways to look at it. And I think that ought to be a topic worth looking at about what happened previously. Our chronic conditions, we're having some problems. Depression is up 76%, and that is not unlike what we see throughout the environment. Certainly the loneliness of COVID and the stresses of COVID, especially for teachers, is contributing to that. Chronic pain is up when people are less mobile. I know I do. I get tightened up. Lower back pain is up. And diabetics is even up 3%. That's not bad, other than the fact that we got a lot of diabetics. Those were the things I think that we wanted to highlight in particular. Our cost per claim is down 18%. Again, I think a lot of that has to do with what we did. I suspect some of it has to do with what it was like before we got here, frankly. We're well below the prior administrator in every single category. Our surgeries, ambulatory surgeries have gone through the roof. Is that a good thing? Well, in this case it is, because hospital inpatient surgeries plummet, which means we're being successful in steering people into lower cost environments. Network penetration, we got 79% of all claims were in tier 1, 89% were in tiers 2 and 1. So we have 11% leakage into tier 3. We do have 48 members that have above average risk and are deficient in following the chronic condition protocols. And we're talking about, it's difficult because if we reach out and people say, how do you know all this about me? You know, there's a privacy issue, and we're working through the communication where we can provide additional resources to people that need it. You have 2,228 members with 3 or more chronic conditions, comorbid. In imaging, according to the statistics, there's only 6% savings left on the table. We've squeezed that lemon pretty hard. And those are just some things. We need to focus more on mammography services, flu, vaccines. Cancer screenings are not where they should be. We're going to get more involved in that. 8.25% of our population has type 1 or type 2 diabetes. It's only an increase of 1% from the prior period, but it's 46% above the benchmark. And that's an area where we really need to continue to focus on. And the low back pain area is up. It's up 24% above the benchmark, but there's only a 10% increase in office visits, a 58% reduction in emergency room visits, and a 9% reduction in hospital admissions due to low back pain. So this is just an example of what we look at. We're constantly scouring the data to ask ourselves, how can we make it better for the members, and how can we save the plan? Yes, sir.
You mentioned diabetes was higher than a benchmark, and I can't remember what, because it's been a while since I was in medical school back in the day. There's 2 types of diabetes.
Yes.
One of them is inherited, that you really can't do much with, that it's genetic, and there's other one that's like, depending on your diet and like your activity level, that you can get it. Are we segregating the difference between the two? Because one of them, we can actually try to do stuff to try to lower it. The other one's genetic. No matter what you do, it's going to happen on, you can mitigate it, but, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
The genetic, you can't really do much.
The type 1, all you can do is find the best way to maintain it. Type 2 is more lifestyle oriented. Kenneth, why don't you talk about diathrive?
Yeah, so at the health center, we are focusing in on those diabetics. We went from about 40% of the total population that are diabetics, now we're at 60%. So we have instituted programs, not only the dietitian, but we also have the DiaThrive program. And that's that diabetic monitor that we give to the patients so that we can monitor what's going on with their diabetes when they're not with us. So yes, you can do things with the diabetes for the type 2, such as lifestyle modification and those type of things. But also in the type 1s, you can still control and make sure that they're taking their insulins or doing whatever they need to do to control it. So we've got some programs that we're going to be launching in the coming months in relation to specifically to the diabetics and to those hypertensives to control them even better, especially those new diabetics that we've recently just captured.
In addition to the program that Kenneth just mentioned about the DiaThrive, the physicians being able to track the blood levels or the sugar levels of those diabetics, those members that are in the program get all their diabetic supplies at no cost.
Great.
So sometimes people wouldn't check their blood because it costs them money to buy their test strips. So we've removed that barrier, so they get all their diabetic supplies at no cost.
And that's why we also brought in the ophthalmologist into the health center, not only because of what we need to do to control the diabetic retinopathy of the eye damage that can cost the district a lot of money. And I think when we met you for the first time is when we launched it and we found 5 serious conditions, and we continue to find those. That's a good thing that we're finding it, and we're able to control it and help them before they go blind. But those are the type of things we bring into the health center to drive more awareness of, hey, look at what your health center's doing. Even the chiropractor, you heard Barry talk about the increase in low back and those type of things. Take a look at our chiropractor's visits, and those continue. And the beauty of those visits, a lot of it's word of mouth. Oh, you gotta go see Dr. Hughes. Oh, you gotta see Dr. Hughes. But in your health center, not only do we have the chiropractor, we have the physical therapist, the IMC, and the provider. And I think I've talked about it before, that the three of them have gotten together to say, hey, we've done everything we can. Let's move to the MRI. Let's move to the orthopedic. Those are the type of things that help control your cost of care that your health center is doing. And yes, there is an increase in those fixed costs, but it's driving more awareness and use of your health center. And right there, look at those prevalence rates that are coming to your health center now that we're capturing, giving them those meds, putting in the pharmacy. And that pharmacy, we've increased in the health center prior to the pharmacy, we've increased the use of vaccinations, the shingles. That was huge for us. And you heard Barry talk about colon cancer. We recognized that there was a lot of the members that did not want to go get colon screening, go to get a colonoscopy. So we put in with our providers the program of the Cologuard, where it's at least you do something. I'll take something better than nothing. Because then if that comes back positive, that might scare the dickens out of that person to actually go get that colonoscopy done. So your health center is doing things methodically from a preventative standpoint, from a screening standpoint, but also a strategy to drive more people to your health center, and it's working.
That's part of what we promised when we were first contracted also, was the idea of having the health center integrated with the rest of the health center. But we're over our time limit. The last couple of pages we just want you to know that as an advisory team, we are constantly researching and looking for programs on the horizon that if they show promise, we can embed into your program. Better access, better care, and lower cost.
Board, do you have any questions?
I have a comment, kind of going back to, it's not really for you guys necessarily, but just a discussion. When you fail to plan, usually leads to failure to realize. So in terms of not planning or waiting until the end to see what happens and then come up with a plan on how we would use these savings, I would strongly advise against that. The fact is as a public entity, we have transparency issues. We need to report how we're gonna spend that money and what the plan is. That's our responsibility, that's our duty. So I think that knowing that our employees have not been really happy with how we have a very aggressive savings type of culture here, which has resulted in good things, but at the same time, in their mind, the rainy days never come, no matter how bad it's storming. So I think that we need to plan for every penny of every savings from this situation to go back into the employees, benefit. We had a discussion recently, Sarah, you and I, and we were talking about the savings here have allowed us to give increases to the employees, right? But I'm of the train of thought that it's not proper to use the savings from the healthcare to increase the pay for our employees and then say, well, this is the purpose. I mean, we should financially be able to provide our employees with a raise, and if we do another initiative that saves us money here, use that money for that same silo. So if this is the money that we're saving for medical, then that should go back to the employee's benefit for medical purposes, as opposed to going back to a general fund and then allowing us to spend that money hiring another consultant to do whatever. So that's just my thought on that issue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Board, anyone else?
If I can follow up on that, just a little bit of planning, because I did a little bit of numbers. We got so many numbers. How many employees are actively insured right now? Is it about 6,500?
6,500.
Yeah.
About 6,500, right?
Correct.
So what I did was, I took 6,500, multiplied by $100 a month. Like say, what would be like significant? That's $650,000. and that's per month, right? So you have to multiply that by 12, that's almost 7 million. So I'm like, for it to be, in other words, like if we were to take the savings and subsidize the employee portion, for them to see a big amount, I don't think we're at that level where there's a significant.
Isn't the employee contribution $50?
If they do the wellness, they don't,
There's one that's 0, and there's 25 if they do the wellness.
Right. But yeah, that's above our pay grade.
Yeah, so for,
But I agree.
yeah, and I'm just trying to prove to Mr. Aguero that, you know, for the employees to see a significant difference in what they're paying per month, we have to save almost $8 million to get to that level. You know?
Well, we discussed $20 million worth of savings.
Nothing per month.
Right.
So it's based on the plan design and which plan you're in, so it's not across the board. That everybody would receive some money back in terms of their premium.
No, I'm just talking like theoretically, just using like a real number. I mean, not just, you know, just saying,
well,
you
we
know.
just make the benefits better with lower cost. So like we showed you earlier how we're making the better, where they benefits, we could make the benefits even richer for the member when they use them.
Because ideally, I would like to lower the cost too when I look at it, but I'm just trying to put it in perspective, you know what I mean? Because I want that, the same desire too that Mr. Aguero said, but to see just $100 a month difference, because people just say, oh, it's just $100 a month. If you take $100 a month, multiply it by 6,500 employees, multiply it by 12, and it's like, holy moly, because then you gotta be careful. We don't wanna be so aggressive at cost savings, and then they don't get a good product at all, you know what I mean? So it's kind of a balance. So I'm just kind of talking out loud since this is kind of like the workshop and sunshine laws, we can't talk to each other, you know, by that. So that's kind of like the thought process, at least where I'm at. I can't speak for the rest of the board, but I do know that, you know, I want to be able to lower the cost to employees, but it's literally going to cost almost $8 million to see $100 a month difference. And that is pretty hard to achieve when that's because the overall budget was like about 60 million. So you're talking about more than a 10% reduction in cost from a prior year to achieve $100 a month savings. And that is really hard to do when the rest of the healthcare industry is increasing in costs at the same exact time. So I think at this time.
What were the numbers, Sarah, that we discussed? You guys are getting a check for $2 million soon, right?
Right.
That $2 million is based on $20 million of savings, right? 8 goes into $20 million more than twice. So the question is, how do we convert what our budgetary planning is, right? If we're planning $60 million in healthcare and we save $20 million over X amount of time, then how does that money, it doesn't matter if it's 100 or if it's 50, if it's $1 or if it's $100 or if it's providing them with free healthcare. The point is, our duty, number one, is to have a plan that is strategic and planned out, right? And number two, that the employees feel like this is in the end a benefit to them, because healthcare is specifically a benefit for them, right? It may allow us, there may be byproducts to healthcare in the sense that our employees will be able to deliver a better education, but the fact is healthcare is a service for the employee, and so those employees should benefit from the savings. That's all I'm saying, whatever it is.
Yeah.
They all understand, just like we do, when they balance their checkbook, that it's not gonna be as much as they thought, or it's gonna be less than they thought, or it's gonna be more than they thought. But that's not our job to figure out what their emotional state is regarding the savings or how they react to it. It's to make sure that we have a plan, that we're transparent about that plan, and that we deliver that back to the employees.
Thank you. Mr. Thacker?
Just, I want to thank you all for what you're doing. We're going in a completely different direction than we were in several ways. Completely different direction on our cost scale and a completely different direction on our approach. And I can tell you, I sat here for several years where we're coming up with almost $1 million a month extra for rising costs. And I don't believe we've had that conversation this year. And so thank you very much. This was kind of the intent. The intent, to be very, very clear, which I know you're aware of, but just for the record, was to not cheapen our care. It was to lower the cost of better care, equal or better care. And I think we're doing that. So I know we're not there. I know it's not perfect, but we're moving in a good direction. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you for having trust in us.
We're
Appreciate it.
honored to work with your team.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
You guys, Barry.
Team.
Barry.
Team.
Very
Mike.
Yes.
I'm continuing to dialogue with Florida Hospital. They have analyzed what has been given to me. We continue to have a large separation financially in terms of cost. Just so you know, we're continuing to try and get there, but at the same time, protect the interest of everybody involved. So if you want to know any more, you can talk with me.
You said Florida Hospital, you mean Florida Hospital or?
Advent Health.
Advent Health,
Yeah, sorry, thank you.
And I know there was a request by one of
Mary.
the board members on the life of a claim, that's the last slide in your packet. If you have any questions, just reach out to me and I'll be glad to go over those with you.
Awesome team. Does anybody else have any questions, Mr. Robert?
I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Popper?
Mr. Robert's fine.
All right, guys, thank you so much for coming and you have a good break.
I'm going to design a list of acronyms for you or a ledger, and I'll get that to Lauren for you.
Okay, thank you.
Of our audit.
I'm just stretching my back.
Oh, there's another workshop?
We're in the same.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that.
Think about all this healthcare back.
You have to go, you have to go to the clinic, very honored.
Yes. Yes. Right. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Did they say you're positive?
That was the dermatologist. That was a dermatologist who said that it
No matter what it is, I'm sure it's
This came
positive.
everything I've got. This came back benign.
So did you
And that's the number one cancer on me.
I'd get a second opinion. Nothing about you is benign.
You don't think?
No, because I'm just gonna get there. Whatever works for you.
So by 11, it'll be good, sure.
The clicker was right there on the table. It's right there beside you.
Thank you.
That's where I'm sitting right now.
And how long does it last?
Thank you.
Till,
Barry is there.
okay, no problem.
All right, guys, we still have a full board meeting, so I wanna make sure that we are respecting the time of our guests, RSM, so I'm gonna go ahead and call the next portion of the workshop to order. Thank you.
Good afternoon, board. Thank you for having us here today. We are RSM, your independent internal audit function. We report directly to you all through your audit advisory committee. Today, I have a couple of representatives from our team with us today. Jill Reyes is a partner with our public sector practice. Some of you may have already met her before. And Matt Demansky is one of RSM's partners. He is a subject matter expert. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce him in just a minute as well. Just a reminder about why we are here. We present to you all annually a risk assessment and internal audit plan where the board and the audit advisory committee approve the plan for internal audit each year. This particular project was on the fiscal year 2021 audit plan, approved some time ago back in 2020. And we are here to deliver to you all today through this workshop the results of that particular internal audit. The goal of that internal audit was to review the internal controls and the design and structure of the health plan itself as the school board undertook this very deep challenge in this new endeavor in their health plan. So you all know me, I'm Laura Manlove, I'm a director in RSM's public sector internal audit practice, and under our partner Jennifer Murtha, I oversee the delivery of all services RSM provides to you all. Matt Demansky is a subject matter expert with our alliance firm PB Merrick's. We brought him in particular for his expertise. He has spent his career serving both private sector clients and several school systems on matters specifically related to healthcare, providing assurance and risk consulting services through his practice. So we're very pleased to partner with him on this particular project and bring you his expertise to serve you all. A little background about the maturity and the timeline of the health plan itself. Starting back in pre-2020 for the public and for anyone who may not be fully aware, the board was having conversations about the unsustainability of the costs of the health plan and had engaged their consultants, Proventure, to consult with them on matters related to what options may be available. In 2019, early 2020, the board decided to move forward and take a more active role in managing and administering their health plan in an effort to reduce and mitigate the increased costs. In early 2020, the board and district leadership worked together to put together the foundation of the new health plan and began having conversations with us, RSM, as the internal auditor. This was on the horizon as something that internal audit should be aware of and should be involved in and take a look at once it had been implemented. The new health plan was implemented October 1 of 2020 when the contract with the previous insurance provider had expired. And in November, the board moved to engage RSM to perform our internal audit. We issued our report to the Audit Advisory Committee and to the school board on October 19th of 2021. I know you all have had it for some time, and I'm sure you read every word. But so for purposes of today, we did intend to keep this presentation brief to leave a little more time for Q&A and discussion, since you've had that detailed report for a little bit of time. I'm gonna turn over, oh no, I'm not, this is my slide. A little bit of background about what the objectives and approach were for this particular internal audit. We took a comprehensive, holistic view in looking at the design and structure of the internal controls related to governance and organization of the health plan itself. We sought to understand the role and responsibility every single vendor has in your health plan ecosystem. And we had many in-depth conversations with each one of those vendors, as well as key players here in the district who are responsible for managing it, including Lauren and her team, general counsel, CFO, superintendent, and an occasional question from a board member as well. The purpose of this report was to identify any gaps or any high-risk improvement areas that the board can continue to focus on as we continue to mature this plan. Recall that this is only about a year old. We were brought in very, very early in the process, and the board who had directed us to do this did that intentionally. They wanted quick, timely feedback on the structure and the governance so that any high-risk changes could be continued to improve upon as the plan matures. If there are any questions about the objectives or the approach, I can take those, or I can move straight into the observations.
The health plan you said was October 2020. When was the health center started? That wasn't here.
Before that, October 2019.
No, 2 to 3 years before that.
Yeah, under Rosencare was October
April
2019.
2016.
So what changed from 2019 to 2020 if the health center was already in? Because you said something started October 1st. What started October 1st that was different the prior year? Because it was already, the new health clinic was already established in 16. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around, because you sound like that's like a benchmark to something. What was it a benchmark from?
Yes.
Like, what was it changed?
So October 1, 2020 was when the new health plan structure was enacted. So
Not
when
just the clinic, it's when we left.
when we left
When
Cigna.
okay, that's what I was looking for. I was
Yes.
looking
The
like,
whole-
it means something, like
The
what
whole
happened.
plan, not just the clinic, is just a piece of the plan.
Okay, so that's when Cigna was no longer providing services for us, like be a third-party
And
administrator.
you all were officially driving at that point.
We're completely self-insured, basically.
Yes. All right. I'm going to move to the observations themselves, and I'm gonna let the subject matter expert, Mr. Demansky, take over from here. So Matt, go ahead.
Thank you. Really appreciate the time to speak before the board today. And as Laura said, October 1st, the school district severed its relationship with Cigna and stood up its own health plan ecosystem. And I suspect that the presentation that was made here today, just a few moments ago, was probably the most complex conversation you've had about your health plan. I suspect things have gotten much more complicated. A lot more decisions that the board needs to make to manage this plan appropriately and effectively. So it was really important, I think, that the project was undertaken And with respect to the project, we have 11 observations, and from those 11 observations, we have 19 recommendations. So some of the observations have multiple recommendations to them. We found from a risk perspective, there were 3 compliance-related matters that were observations, 6 operational related matters, and 2 vendor-related matters that we'll address in a moment. So it was a very thorough review. We looked across the plan risk universe and tried to identify what we believe were significant areas that the board should focus on. So again, the first observation that we noticed was the complexity of the plan and how significant it has changed. And given the board members and your skill sets here, we really felt like it would be beneficial, although we believe that the board is sufficiently skilled to handle this, that they should consider adding additional consultants to assist them with their review of the healthcare system and the reporting as you move forward. There were lots of things that were presented today and lots of questions that were asked and lots of questions that weren't asked today with respect to the information. And I just feel like, and we feel like, an additional level of expertise would give you more transparency and allow for more open discussion and maybe, better decision making as you move forward. So that's kind of one of our first things that we'd like to recommend.
One thing though, when you think about that though, isn't that the purpose of ProVenture? Because I've been on the board, I had a gap in service. I served on the board a long time ago when we were considering creating the health clinic in the first place and it didn't have the critical mass at the time. When I think of what the role of what ProVenture does is to be that external consultant, not the one delivering the healthcare clinic. Like Rosencare does the clinic and they do the clinic and that's their job and I respect that. I always assumed that that was the role of ProVenture, right? ProVenture was supposed to look at the entire picture and say, this is what's working, this is what's not working, this is where you can improve. So it kind of gets me a little bit concerned when you say we need an additional layer. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, but I was thinking, but isn't that what we have? Is ProVenture not providing that?
You do to an extent, but some of the questions, like for example, some of the information that's presented today, I would have been asking questions about COVID's impact to the plan and how did that really impact the expenses. And they didn't touch upon that. And I'm not saying they didn't touch upon that intentionally, but there are some of the things that another expert who was outside of ProVenture, that was independent, could be asking on your behalf, or you could be asking those questions just to make sure that you're hitting all those important salient points, right?
But I think in fairness, our CFO, I sat in a meeting where she did ask that impact.
Right.
So,
Right.
to imply that it hasn't been asked, it has.
So there's some of the things that,
But
some
we
of the
hear the
reasons
result,
why.
right?
Some of the
And
reasons
it's one
why I
thing to
would
ask
say
for
that.
Ford to do a review on the Ford vehicle. In this situation, is also a problem, right?
I'm sorry, I missed your comment.
You wouldn't ask Ford to do a review on a Ford vehicle for a proper response.
Right.
And that's essentially the situation that we have right now, right? I mean, with the parties involved. So I mean, for me, it's perfectly good reason to have RSM. I mean, please, I'm sorry, go ahead, continue.
Yeah, so that's one of the recommendations that we would make, that we really feel like this has gotten very complex, right? And we just want to make sure that the board is asking all the questions and making sure that that you're really looking at things as thoroughly as you really can.
And if I may add, Matt, quickly, I think also I want to make sure that we make it clear that the purpose of this recommendation is not necessarily to replace or audit ProVenture, but really to provide a resource to the board. You all are serving as public officials with various backgrounds and not necessarily in health plan management. So this would be a recommendation for a subject matter resource specifically for you all to properly govern and ask the questions of ProVenture and your other vendors on your behalf and guide you in that aspect.
members of the board, so you know, we have asked Matt to serve in that role for us because of his extensive knowledge and how much he said something very correct. We watched as he asked questions that none of us had that background to ask. And so I'm in complete agreement. Well, you know, we want to continue to work with you.
Yeah, sure, if that's something the board would like to discuss, I'd be happy to discuss it, but regardless, I would say, I would really encourage you to think about someone else that can assist you as a subject matter expert that you can bounce ideas off of and ask questions and or can advise you of other things, other places you can grow, right?
I completely agree with you.
The next thing is plan administrative responsibilities. So these are really complicated plans. You were in a scenario before what I would almost say it's kind of a set it and forget it mentality. You're with a national insurance carrier, you're relying on all their expertise, all the compliance that they have in place to make sure everything is running properly relative to all the laws that you have to comply with. Now you as plan sponsors are taking on that responsibility, right? And so one of the things that we were looking to see was, a plan administrative manual that talked about those responsibilities, outlining those compliance-related areas. What is the school district doing themselves? What are they taking on as it relates to it? What are the vendors taking on? And then relative to what the vendors are taking on, do they understand those compliance related matters? Is it in their contract? And we didn't see that kind of plan administrative manual. And so we're asking that be created because it's really important to make sure from a compliance perspective that you're on top of things. And things continue to change, right? So it's really important that be undertaken. We did look at certain acts and laws that we felt like were very important for you to consider. We did see evidence that they were considered, but again, we feel like a formal manual is really kind of an important part of that process. So that was our second observation. Our third observation relates to the employer and plan sponsors' role as it relates to HIPAA and privacy. HIPAA is a rule that is very complicated and it's there to protect the employee and their use of their healthcare data. And it requires the employer and the plan sponsor to bifurcate that role and only allow certain individuals who have certain responsibilities within the employer to use that information, and they can only use it in certain ways. And when we looked at that and we talked about how the district was handling this, we felt comfortable that it was properly bifurcated. But we didn't get that same level of comfort as it related to some of the other controls that we would like to see in place in some of the training that we feel like is really necessary on a routine, annualized basis. Again, as you begin to undertake this plan and this responsibility and you bring a lot more of the stuff in-house, this becomes critical relative to the process. One of the things I know Frank has been working on is trying to make sure that you have access and have your healthcare data locked up in a data warehouse so that you don't run it up against the same issues that you had before in trying to get that data as you began to move and implement this plan so that you could actually utilize it. And before that can really happen, we need to make sure that we enhance these types of controls.
And just so I understand, because that happened, I heard like when Cigna was in I want to say in control of the data, they weren't sharing with us that data. But now that Cigna isn't there, we own the data. So you're kind of saying is that's a new procedure. Now that we own it, great, but there comes responsibility with owning that data.
Absolutely.
We have to make sure that we maintain HIPAA compliance.
Right.
But also in the process of requiring everyone who has data, we want it backed up, not only where they're backing it up, by backing it up where we have access to it, so nobody can ever do what Cigna did.
Now, do you guys have like I wouldn't even mind requesting the board to give you guys an additional, engagement because I know HIPAA has compliance forms and things like that, because they do their own audits too. HIPAA can sit there and do their own. Do you guys have an idea what HIPAA wants? And you guys can do like another engagement on that specifically, on just HIPAA compliance and making sure that the school district has all the forms that we need, that we are in fact, complying with all their standards they require?
And that's what we're asking you to do, engage an expert with respect to HIPAA compliance, not only to implement additional policies and procedures, but then to do some compliance-oriented checks and balances to make sure that you're following those guidelines and they're meeting all the requirements. The thing about HIPAA that's kind of unique is it's not one of those standards that says, do these 10 things and you're okay. It's a set of rules that are in place that allows an organization, depending on the complexity and the size of the organization, to do different things. The first thing that you have to do with respect to HIPAA is you have to do an annual risk assessment. Those risks will drive a lot of the policies and procedures that you have in place. Now, there are certain things that you must, but a lot of it is based on the risk that you have and how much data you have access to and what you're utilizing that data for. So it is, again, it's something that we have expertise in. Whether or not that's something that you would want us to move forward in, we can.
So Dr. Pace, I believe, and I'm just speaking for myself, but I just know the importance of that, so I can imagine the board agreeing too. So I don't know what the procedure is for that. Do we need to do an RFP for that, or do we need to change our budget? If that wasn't an original budget, do we need to amend it? Because I think that is pretty important, because now that we own the data, we have to protect it.
Let's get through a
May I-
good chunk of
yeah.
this, because there's gonna be overlaps in what some of these people
Yeah,
do.
and 1 second, please.
Sure.
I don't believe that I have a copy of this. It's probably online somewhere, so forgive me if I'm asking a question that you don't need to, that I need to ask, but you have the summary of observations, is there a summary of recommendations after this?
Yeah, well, so I'm kind of hitting upon all kind of at the same time,
Thank you.
and so.
Okay, perfect, because then
Then we can go through each one.
That's what I'm saying.
We
Yes,
can
we
rank
have-
them as kind of like what's important
thank you, I know it's on here.
relative to.
I'm
time.
asking, I'm asking for the purposes of making sure that we are compliant with time. We do have a
Sure.
board meeting, and I know that we have recommendations that we wanna put out there, but I think that you've already made those recommendations, so we can go ahead and take a look at them.
Exactly.
Thank
As I
you.
hit the observations, I'm kind of then talking about the recommendations.
Madam
Yeah.
Chair,
Yes.
So in the,
hang on.
go right ahead.
Throughout the year, every time we've had any HIPAA issue, we've been talking with Washington, which enforces it and deals with it. They also provide training. Laura and I have been talking about having them come in. They do it for free.
Yeah.
But we're also looking at private consultants too. But just wanted the board to know we're very careful on HIPAA. The only, and we require all our vendors to adhere to the law. What we have to build in is that check and balance. Are they complying with the law? Which Matt has helped with, but just know that we're on top of this HIPAA issue.
Perfect, thank you.
If there's no more comments or questions, I'll move to observation 4 real quickly. Again, I'll just kind of reiterate the complexity and the complications, or the complexity with the plan and the reporting. And you could see as they were going over certain reports, you were talking about making changes or help me understand what this report really means. We're asking, as things have really become more complicated, there are certain reports that you really want to make sure that you have to make sure that you're managing the plan properly. And we're just asking that as this plan matures and you start going down that road, that somebody work with Sarah and make sure that you've got all the reporting that you really need in a nice condensed, concise package so that you could actually understand it and ask really good questions, right? Because a 100-page report isn't going to help anyone. It's just too much information to go through. So I want to boil it down to things that are really important so that you can really ask the right questions and get the information. claims administration, user controls, you have two main administrators processing and paying claims. One is called a third-party administrator. They process your medical claims. Another one is a PBM who's processing your prescription drug claims. Those organizations have controls in place, key controls in place to make sure that they're processing claims in a timely and accurate manner. But they also are relying on you as a board and a plan sponsor to do certain things. You supplement their internal control structure. So they could be doing everything right, but if you're not doing the things that they expect you to do, they're gonna pay claims wrong. They don't have SOC reports, these entities, they should. So one of the things that we're encouraging to do is encourage them to get a SOC report. A SOC report is an annual report of a processing center that explains their process and audits it and says that they're in compliance, that the process is properly designed and is working effectively. So that gives you assurance that, okay, it appears as if they're doing a good job, they're reputable and so forth. But within that SOC report too are the user controls, and those user controls are things that will tell you what you need to be doing to make sure their process is working effectively. So until they have SOC reports, we're encouraging you to reach out to them, talk and have conversations about the user controls that they expect you to perform. We've had some of those conversations. Some of the items have been documented in our report of the expectations that you should be doing certain things, and many of these things you are doing, but there are a few things that I believe you probably could be doing a little bit differently to ensure that, you know, all those checks and balances are in place. So that's user controls is another operational risk that we identify.
And in our experience, this is very typical this early on in the stage of such a full-blown radical implementation. This is very typical to see areas of continued improvement and things that we can continue to work on as this plan matures.
Yeah, I mean, you went from 0 to 100 very quickly, right? And so we were expecting to find lots of things, right? And so it's not necessarily a reflection that somebody didn't do what they should have done. It's just natural. And
Because the question I would have, and it's the same thing, it's just like a trust but verify, because something new, is the rebate programs too. Because now a lot of times, you know, we pay a claim ahead to get the rebate. Is the rebate getting credited back to us, or is the PBM keeping the rebate, or somebody else keeping the rebate? I don't even know. I would like to have some kind of assurance to do like a rebate check and making sure that our plan is getting that money back and not somebody else.
And that's some of the stuff that we'll talk about in a minute. So absolutely. Provider networks, in discussions with Lauren and her team, we discovered that the provider network from Evolution Healthcare System was not being updated timely. It was not accurate. The district is working with Evolution, and it's a credit to the district that they identified that and they began working with them early on. But that is an area that really is critical because your members are relying on that. You know, you've got that program that where you're steering your members to certain providers, and that individual, that group is using that provider network. So if it's not up to date, if it's not accurate, it's going to cause problems. So what we're saying is continue to work with Evolutions to update that, and we're asking you to put in some additional controls to make sure that it's maintained and continues to be updated in an appropriate manner. Cost containment is really important. Cost containment strategy is really critical to an efficient operating plan. Again, we had the set it and forget it mentality of Cigna. They had their own cost containment process. They would use their own cost containment vendors within their organization, and they would come and they would sell you certain cost containment services, right? This is very different. You've got lots of different vendors that are working, and you need to then look at it and implement a cost containment strategy across all those vendors. It becomes very complicated and complex. There is a cost containment strategy per se. I didn't see it necessarily documented to any great extent. You know, we talked to Provinsure. They have a cost containment strategy in place and underway, we would like to see it be a little bit more formalized. As we talk to the TPA and we talk to the PBM, we identified areas within their own process where we felt like there were opportunities to improve their cost containment strategy. In the prepayment and the post-payment process of the TPA, their payment integrity process, they were lacking fraud, waste, and abuse processes. In fact, they don't even have a vendor that they offer for that service. There are third-party vendors that you could supplement and put into that process. Hospital bill audits, duplicate claim reviews, these are all the things that they weren't doing, some of which they offered but you didn't elect to do, others they didn't even offer. So there are opportunities here for you to strengthen your cost containment strategy, and I think a well-documented strategy is really important. And then looking across the healthcare system and making sure it's implemented. Again, I think Providence Shore had a really good strategy. I just didn't just didn't see a document. Next area is business continuity plan. This is just
Now, what about, did you have it, excuse me, I'm sorry, did they have documented for prescription drugs? Because we had a couple workshops and they're very clear about steering people to the trade names versus, I mean, the generics versus trade names, and they were very good at outlining that.
Right, there were certain aspects of it that we did recognize and see. I just don't think there were areas that I felt like were lacking and there were gaps there. Business continuity plan, this is just kind of a typical, plan that any organization should have in place. The school districts itself should have a business continuity plan. You should have one for your health plan. So this is an area that we think, whether you wrap it in the overall school district's plan or whether it's something separate, we think a business continuity plan for the health plan is an important thing to make sure that you have in place and it's well documented. You understand what is going to happen with respect to that particular area. Customer service, obviously it is critical to keep your employees happy and make sure that they're being well served. Having an effective and efficient plan is really important, but you really want to serve your customers to the best degree you can. Your employees, you want to make them happy. We think that you should formalize your customer service strategy. I don't think we didn't find evidence of a formal strategy. There's a lot of things going on, and there's a lot of players in the game. Different players are answering different questions, different problems. They get elevated to learn to handle a lot of these things. One of the things that we didn't see, and we're going to touch upon this in a minute, we didn't see any performance guarantees related to customer service with any of your contracts. This is an area that we really should have some performance guarantees in place. It's one of the ways that you hold your vendors accountable to make sure they're doing the right things, to make sure that they're giving your employees that employee experience that you want them to have through the health plan. Management oversight of the plan, this is what we were speaking about earlier. Really, you need an integrated risk management approach to manage all of these vendors. That's an approach that includes reporting. It's an approach that includes third-party audits and reviews and reconciliations of data. You should have a process that includes not only operational reviews of your vendors to make sure that their operational structure is designed properly and operating effectively, but claims audits to make sure they're paying claims properly. You have reporting for overpayment recoveries to make sure you understand how much money is being paid in error, or the reasons why they're paying in error, make sure they're collecting that money back. It is something that you need to formalize that we did not see being formalized. Performance guarantees, this is the 11th and final recommendation. Again, we saw some mention of performance guarantees in contracts, but we didn't actually see any performance guarantees or very few performance guarantees, it's really important that you hold your vendors accountable for what they're doing. The nuclear option of, okay, if they don't do it, we're just gonna fire them is not a good option. That's not the road you wanna go down. You really wanna work with your vendors. This is really complicated. They're going to make mistakes. You wanna incrementally improve the process. You don't wanna have to pull that button, getting rid of it. It's very painful. You spend a lot of time and energy developing relationships, making sure these people can pay your claims properly, can manage your healthcare systems appropriately, and your employees get very connected to these people because they're constantly dealing with them, right? So you wanna make sure that you have performance guarantees in place. Typically, a TPA performance guarantees would include such things like account management, areas in eligibility, claims processing, cost containment, customer service. These are similar guarantees you have for your PBM. Other guarantees for other vendors like Provinsure or your network vendor, they would be different but similarly structured. So we really feel like that is an important part of the vendor management process.
They can also help you identify when you do need to make that difficult decision and decide whether or not a relationship should continue to exist.
Yeah, there's gonna be times where you're gonna have to make changes. It's just the nature of the business, but you don't wanna have to if you can avoid it, and having performance guarantees, it really does help. And then sometimes monitoring them. The one thing about performance guarantees, people will say, well, they're all self-reported, and that's true, they are self-reported, but you can go in and occasionally do a review of them and ask for the documentation and re-performance and actually do some sampling to see whether or not they're really hitting the metrics that they say they're doing. But it's important that they're there and in place. So I know I did that quickly. I know we were on a time crunch, and so I was trying to honor that and make sure that we hit everything. So now I think we have a few more minutes. Does anybody have any more questions or concerns?
Yes, Mr. Melendez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellent presentation, by the way. I want to clarify something I said at the last board meeting because I understand the context a little bit better. So I appreciate the internal audit that was engaged now, even though it wasn't so focused on financial auditing, it was more on the process because we're using a whole new healthcare model and we kind of needed the overview of kind of like, okay, what were the inefficiencies in the model as presented? So, I really appreciate what you guys brought to the table and looking at the overview. And then I would like to see maybe sometime in the future, just then a deeper dive on just what was presented. Like you said, rebates. I want to make sure all the rebates came back to us. We also have pass-through costs of like Band-Aids and things like that at the health clinic itself. So just kind of verifying that what they invoiced us, that they paid for 100 Band-Aids, that they paid for 100 Band-Aids, you know what I mean? Just kind of things like that. And so that's when I typically think of an internal audit as. But I'm coming to appreciate more what you guys did first because we have to get a general overview. Because we switched from one way of doing business to another, we need to know where that was working. So I just want to publicly clarify that because I did kind of mention last time, I was like, and I even kind of admonished the board, and I guess I'm apologizing to the board as well. I was like, why do we do it this way? Why don't we do like a deeper dive on certain areas? And so I'm very clear, and I appreciate the way you guys articulated what was here. And so, but just moving forward, maybe that's a board to discuss, the board has to discuss this. To what level do we want to just have a surety audit to make sure that what they're saying is true?
Thank you.
Laura will tell you that's part of the phase 2 audit plan.
Board
Part
Member
of it.
Arguello? Oh, I'm sorry,
sorry.
were you gonna answer? I apologize.
It's okay, I was just gonna say, part of internal audit is reviewing the governance of a process first, making sure that you're aware of your responsibilities and you have those controls in place, and then come back in after you've made some of these changes that make sense and are reasonable for you, and then we can take a look at it that way.
Thank you.
Board Member Arguello?
Thank you. So Matt, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Are these things, or of these 10 things or of these 11 things, which one of them should have been there at the very beginning? For example, which ones of these were there when we had Cigna?
So when you had Cigna, it was it was a very different scenario, because they had a lot of these programs and processes already wrapped into things. So give me a minute to think about what you're asking here.
We can go through them. So would they have a plan sponsor responsibility? I mean, they would have,
So you would have a plan sponsor responsibility, but at that point, the plan was not nearly as complex. You were not having to make so many
Right.
decisions. So I felt like the board and its expertise was fine. So I wouldn't have, at that point, recommended an external party. Plan administrator responsibilities, I wouldn't have expected a plan administrator manual because there wasn't as much complexity, and that was something Cigna was handling almost exclusively for you. There probably would have been some HIPAA policies I may have said that maybe you could have done a little bit more, maybe a little bit more enhancement there. You probably could have and should have gotten some additional reporting from Cigna, because every client I go to, I always get additional reporting from them, because there are certain reports that they just don't routinely hand out that I think is critical. The user controls, I don't know whether or not you were following the user controls, and I just can't comment on that. Provider network was totally different. Cost containment, I suspect that there were probably some gaps in the cost containment strategy at Cigna as well. I suspect that there were things that you either didn't elect into and or were just missing. I do lots of audits of Cigna, and I know where they're missing certain things. And they definitely have issues with their, in that area. Business continuity plan wasn't relevant. You know, customer service probably wasn't relevant. You probably didn't have the auditing that you could have had, the management oversight. You probably weren't auditing rebates. You probably weren't doing claims audit like you could have. So that was probably something that I would have come in and I would have said the same thing. Performance guarantees, I suspect that you had performance guarantees with Cigna because they're standard in Cigna's contract. That's just something that they offer. So that's what I guess how I would answer your question.
Thanks. So, obviously these are complexities that are being added, right? So we're switching the model, right? There's gonna be a transition. In the transition, if you're, like I said, a car example earlier, you're building a brand new car, and there's gonna be things that you forget, right? You get into the car, you realize you forgot the lock button, you know, whatever it is. But certainly these are things that we should have, right? It's fair to say that we should have these. This is standard practice in this scenario, right? Regarding the SOC report, who does have SOC reports right now? Is that like a standard industry practice?
It's a standard industry practice with any service center. And actually in the healthcare space, high trust is kind of the next level up, and many providers have a high trust report, which is even better than a SOC report. But a SOC report is kind of the minimum standard, which you would expect your third-party administrator and your PBM to have, and some others that are providing those types of services.
Okay. First of all, I agree with Mr. Melendez. This is a very good report, good information. Lastly, Barry, you're the last one standing. You're the last one here. So, just a question. When we contracted your team, right, to come in and make this transition, do you think that, was the philosophy a holistic one? That we were gonna do something, we're gonna create a model, and this model was not intended to have holes in it. It was intended to be complete, and so on. And I'm not saying this to throw you under the bus or anything, or I'm not asking for that reason. And I'll tell you my intention in advance so you feel comfortable to answer in a way that's candid. I'm just wondering, in terms of the $2 million that we're paying, right, because of the $20 million of savings, when that check is written, is there any money that should be discounted from that $2 million so that we can incorporate these things? So, because they probably should be. Not that it's anyone's fault that they're not, Because there are things that you learn as you create this model that you may need a little bit here or there, right?
I'm looking at that right now.
Are you?
Yeah, Sarah and I have spoken
John, can I
about
just
that.
say one thing?
Sure.
And I apologize, maybe I shouldn't speak up, but I think this is part of maturity, right?
Yeah.
So when you, like you said, when you start and you build something, it's not going to be perfect. And as it matures, these things get added on. So some of these things here, it's a matter of things that, they just evolve. You can't do everything at once. It's almost
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
I just offer that as kind of a comment.
And that's why I'm doing it in as friendly as possible way as I can, because
Yeah, 'cause
that's
things
not my
happen-
nature.
Things happen, yeah.
It's not my nature necessarily, but I wanna make sure that I appreciate the work that you guys have done and where we've gotten, right? There's obviously been a drastic improvement over our situation, and the trend lines and everything says that this is a good move and we're doing good things. If you're building a car and you forget the brakes because you have 500,000 other things to put into the car, right? Then when the time comes to put the brakes in, who's gonna pay for it becomes the question, right? So my duty is here, I represent the district, right, I represent the community here, I'm just asking for that, and it might be like a Sarah thing. Frank just said that you guys are already
In fact,
asking that question, so I'm glad that's the case.
During the meeting, you saw me walk over to Sarah because Barry said something that triggered another issue on that to look at.
Okay,
So we are talking about it. So we can then present to Dr. Pace. This is what we think.
okay, great.
It's a very good question.
So, that's all I got, I appreciate the information, it's scary information. And that was not necessarily hitting on you guys, I'm just,
Oh, no.
right, I think it's a fair thing to ask.
Are you encouraging a response?
Sure, yeah,
Well, we go
A couple of observations. We didn't build this plan, we've been using these plan elements certainly at a more modest scale for 5 to 6 years. So this isn't something we said, geez, we hope it'll work. The other thing I would say is that in the typical RFP.
Barry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, what were you saying then? You're saying, we hope this doesn't work, what were you saying then?
We knew it worked.
Okay, good.
And we respect and admire the courage of the board to take that step of faith. We don't view, I've been doing this 50 years, I don't view what we're doing as unusually or particularly complicated. It can appear more complicated because it's transparent. Inside of Cigna, you had no clue what was going on. And I'm not certain that your better interest. But our position as advisors and brokers is different than the market that most people have become accustomed to. And that is that for 98% of the marketplace, the compensation comes from the insurance company, and there's a question of who the broker or the advisor is working for. All of our compensation for your health plan comes from the board. And our performance guarantee is we put our fees at risk. And if it didn't work, it cost us a lot of money. If it did work, fortunately, we get paid appropriately. But I just wanted you to know that this wasn't something we came up with 3 weeks before suggesting you embark on.
Correct. If I can piggyback on Barry, when we partnered together, Barry's experience in the marketplace, and then combined with our Rosing Care model, Rosing Care, we just celebrated our 30th anniversary of our on-site health center and the national, profile that we've come to. So there's a tremendous experience that we have in running our health plan and bringing that to, your group definitely helped.
Yeah,
So-
my responses were operationally, internal to the plan, but by all means, having a HIPAA training program and protocols is very appropriate. By all means, there should be a plan administration manual at your level. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there.
So, let me ask you guys, because it sounds like what you're saying, do you need these things or not? Do we need these things or not? Should they be implemented?
That's, in my opinion, that's, the
I'm asking, yeah, your opinion, from your perspective, do we need these things?
I think a good number of them would enhance the compliance aspects of what you're doing. I would tend to agree with Mr. Melendez. Provencher and I am responsible. The point I was making about brokers and who they work for is we work for you. And if working with you, we come with better results, it's better for everyone. So I think that we have the capability certainly of giving you advice. I think RSM's comment that it might be self-serving because you're asking the wolf to comment on what the wolf's doing, but I'm telling you, we're not a wolf. We literally structured our relationship so that we work for Lauren and Sarah and Dr. Pace.
Well, that was my comment. It wasn't RSM's comment really, or I was making that inference, not them. But so sure.
I just want to clarify for the record, while you report to them, you work for this board. You said you work for them. While you report to those three,
oh yes, we
work for the board.
Thank you.
I was going to make the correction as well.
But our better outcomes are in alignment, unlike we always say the reason they're called brokers is because you're a broker when they finish. But we maintain more of an advisory role.
Right.
And
So
that's why we have
I
ours
think
for
that-
the audit and make sure that they're doing the right things.
I mean, I still think that there's truth to that. You in the end, right? If I I like to keep with a theme. If I build a car, right, and I think that my car is the best car in the world, and then I hire a mechanic, and that mechanic does his work, and he's a great mechanic, right? But if you have now, you're going to have a safety inspector. You're not going to have the mechanic do that job,
Right.
right? No matter how much faith you have in it, the fact is you should have somebody else do the safety inspection. It just makes sense to do that, right? So, yeah, and it seems like that's what we're doing. So now the safety inspector has said this car needs brakes. Now I'm asking the mechanic, do we really need brakes, right? And how aggressive do these brakes need to stop this car, right? So that's kind of the conversation that we're having now. And then, if I'm paying that mechanic, I paid him the fee, right? He's got to put brakes in. How do we split that cost of putting in the brakes when we knew that we needed brakes to begin with, right? As a holistic relationship, as coming on, because you're telling me, hey, we weren't guessing, we weren't crossing our fingers, we knew this was gonna work, right? But in your situation, you guys know it works in a hotel that's owned privately, right? Now, this is a situation where we answer to 400,000 people, right? And they all have different reasons on why they like it or they don't like it, or what they expect for us to say, or how they expect us to interact with the plan, right? So, but I think it's fair. I got my answer, but thank you both very much.
Thank you, Ms. Regoya. Board, any other comments?
So very much.
Dr. Pace?
No.
Thank you.
Board members, we do have snacks in the conference room if you'd like to share.
Yeah, so you got that.
Thank you.